Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. As I'll say in this next voiceover, this is a voiceover follow up to a video that's on my Gratefulness meditation channel and also be part of the Journey series. But again, I'll say that here. Okay, so this audio is going to be a part of the 155th Journey series, as well as I'll put it on my backup channel. I haven't posted anything there in a while. But yesterday, or I made it public this morning, I posted a video entitled video of a gathering I went to in 1996, and that's on my the Gratefulness meditation channel. And so somebody sent me a video of Chargy giving a talk in Molina, Georgia, ashram in 1996, and then there was two accompanying videos. So it was an Abhyasi who had videoed the gathering, and this was shortly after. This was the first gathering I saw Chargy at after I was made a preceptor. And there was also videos of the ashram and all these things. And as I said, in the video, if you want to go see that, I have some of the clips that I couldn't feel the energy I felt when I was there. I remember the gathering. I remember some of the things that happened there. I remember some of the talk that Chargy gave. And so it was a nice thing. This is where things are starting to come full circle, where people who are hearing about Sajmark from me are finding stuff on the internet, sending it to me, right? Which is, a bonus to the whole thing. And, I had a whole kind of, I don't want to say surreal because that's an overused expression, but I had this experience of the whole thing, because, it was, I don't know, almost 30 years ago. And it was my third year practicing, and I'd just been made a preceptor, and I just moved to New Mexico, and things were happening at that gathering that, like all these gatherings, internal things were happening, spiritual things that were going to unfold into my life being what it was, the marriage I was about to get into and all these things the following year, all these things were going to unfold, right? But so I was looking through the video and I was just seeing people there, people who had quit, people who had, failed later on. And, I talk about that in the video I posted yesterday. And I recognize people now that at the time I didn't know, right, or didn't know well. And then all these people who have failed in one way or another. There's a guy who was, he's the guy that copyrighted me, I believe, this guy. He's one of Dodgy's Inner Circle guys. And he was, a young Indian guy at the time. And I saw him, and he's really young in the video, just lurking around there. And then all of a sudden, Chargy moved. He was on the deck, and I was standing right behind him. And I was looking at myself. It took me a while to recognize it was me. I knew the person. And it was this weird thing that happened. And I remember being there because I was doing, this light security that was involved, right? And I, talk about this in the video. If you guys want to check out I show a little bit about that. And one of the things I didn't talk about yesterday was Chargy immediately started telling a story in which Babaji said, how can I find more people like you to Chargy? And Chargy said, become a salesman. And Chargy told this story very often, or said this a lot, because Chargy was a salesman. He said, the best way to be a salesman is have something sell itself. Have something that's so good that it sells itself. That you don't need to sell it because it's, people want it. And, and I'm standing right behind him it's just this moment. And, the Sajmark system is something that he was, in a sense, selling because he let it sell itself because it's so great, right? And to some extent, there's some transfer of some of Chargy's abilities that I've received in terms of doing the videos and, speaking in this way and, being able to articulate the Sajmark teachings and things. This is like a gift that I was given, or a job or whatever. Something was transferred there, which I felt was interesting. But the other piece is that I just was trying to process what I was seeing last night after I made a copy of the videos and all these things so I could have them in some future or whatever. And it was the first time I really saw something that was, you know, very personal to me because, not only because I was in the video, but, there's a moment where my brother was driving Chargy back from the ashram. This is the gathering in which I introduced my mom to Master Chargy. My brother said, Chargy's coming out. Why don't you go bring mom up? And so my brother got me to introduce my mom, which is, nice of my brother's part. And I had this moment. There's a video of that somewhere, but I've never seen it, but I know it exists because someone was recording it on their phone. And, there's this, blissful moment. My mom, Chargy was really soft, his eyes, like he had been harsh, kind of with, most of the times I'd interact with him, he was kind of gruff or whatever. But he came out as really soft, and I said, this is my mom, Rita Romano, and my brother and my mom, Rita Romano. And my mom was really soft, like kind of spiritual glowing. She said, thank you for this gift of being able to come here. And Chargy said, thank you for the gift of your two fine sons. And he turned, and there was just this moment, and this, there's a guy who, one of the more, saintly Yabiasis, young guy, he came up to me a couple years later, said, yeah, he was standing right there, and I remember him standing there. And this guy's just a positive person, nice family. He was married to like a, really saintly wife. Sometimes I see photos of their family. They post photos on their, Facebook thing. And the guy said to me that he thought that my mom got liberated in that moment, right? So it was kind of a, interesting thing. And it came out in the heels of me having thoughts about my mom when Chargy was making me a preceptor. So this is in 1995 when I was in India. And then, I came back and lived in New Mexico, and then Chargy came that following summer. And my mom had started, doing the meditation because I called her. And she said she would do it, right? Which was interesting because I had thoughts about her when Chargy was giving me the final sitting. So that whole thing came full circle, right? But anyways, there was that. And then Kamish gave one of these horrible talks. He was really bad at public speaking. Then he got better. And then he got bad again. But he was like he said something about Babaji's mumbling. He was confused and just, and Chargy's sitting there and Kamish giving a talk. And there's an image of Kamish sort of lurking by the master's, rooms that he had. The master has these, little cottage area. And Kamish was lurking there. And he had one of those like mustaches that police always have in India. It looks like a. Anyway, so there was all that. Like that happened at the gathering, and I didn't know it. But I was then the guy filmed the guy who filmed Chargy leaving on a flight to Hartford, Connecticut, which was always my airport. Which I wasn't there at the airport, so I don't know why he flew there. I think they were maybe working on buying they had just purchased this land, or this guy donated his half of the building. He bought a building. The guy who I saw in the video who no longer practices, and he was bitter, like he left angry and bitter at the people in the center, right? He quit. But he had a computer business, and he sold he donated the bottom half of it, a basement, to be a meditation hall, like a meditation center for the local group that where I started. And so all those things, that was like a lot of stuff was happening. And that was probably the closest airport to that area. So I think that Chargy went right to there. But as Chargy faded away as he walked down into the, the whatever they call that thing between the tarmac and the plane, he, it was just some kind of, I don't say sad. It was just, watching him physically walk away, just the whole thing about his era being over. But I was thinking about this last night, that he props so many people up, that lots of people have quit and lots of people have fallen, and they're not able to connect to the energy or feel the energy because I wasn't able to feel it in Heartfulness, and I'm assuming they experience the same thing. The Heartfulness energy is not as good, right? It's not the same. It's not even not as good. It's no longer the same thing. And Daji isn't able to connect people, probably because he can't even connect himself. And so, the whole thing that he's doing, it's been completely contaminated. and how much Chargy propped everybody up. Because how many of these people who, you went to these gatherings and felt the bliss and were uplifted to a higher level of consciousness, and then they just, Chargy would leave and they would go back, and but he was somehow, just carrying all these people. And then when he died, it just fell apart. And so I don't know how many of these people feel connected, because I just had this like weekend, in my last Journey series video, where I not weekend, but I had a couple of days. It was Lalaji's Mahasamadhi day. I don't know if it had something to do with that. That's when it started, and I still feel it. But I had these 3 days where I was waking up in the middle of the night and transmission was just flowing through, and I just felt this, like it was just a wonderful experience, like just being saturated by it, and just being, it was a kind of a big deal in terms of the whole thing. But anyways, there's all these people that were on a higher level that I just don't think are, and I don't know. Like I'm not in contact with them, but I just know that there's been, it's fallen. The system has fallen. It wasn't like it was, and I've been having more of these moments recently, which is great, where I feel just saturated with the transmission. Just I feel connected, and how I used to feel when Chargy was here. And I haven't had that, in some years, but I've had to fight for it, right? Like all the things that I've had to do to, to cut my ties to heartfulness and not have access to preceptors and, ashrams and places like that gathering. And then my videos, I'm covering, politics and celebrity culture and all the depravity in the world. And so, but to have that like deep connection to the source, I've had to fight for it, and I don't know how many other people have done the same thing, and I don't really. It's none of my really concern at this point. But I can just see how much Chargy was propping everybody up, and when he left, there was just nothing, right? There was just a huge fall off, and people are struggling. And so then the Dodgy Truther sent me a bunch of stuff this morning. This is a LinkedIn thing here. And I have 3 pages open here if I'm the right one. Launch of the Heartfulness workshop at CGI. CGI is some kind of institution in India, not CGI, but it's kind of funny. We are thrilled to announce the completion of a 3-day Heartfulness Institute workshop, part of Health, Happiness, and Heartfulness program at CGI. On the first day, the participants were introduced to heartfulness relaxation and meditation techniques. On the second day, participants learned effective technique to rejuvenate and detox the complexities and purities of the mind. On the last day, the participants were introduced to the technique of inner correct for improving sleep patterns. The 3 integral sessions were introduced by veteran heartfulness trainers, certified trainers, and it gives these people's name. The sessions were attended by 1,100 people, worldwide employees of CGI, including their senior management from Bangalore. This is then from the health and wellness team of CGI leads this engagement in collaboration with the heartfulness trainers. See, what they've done is taken this cleaning and the meditation, and the relaxation thing was something Dodgy added. That was never part of the original practice. And they've turned it into something corporate. And they did this when Dodgy was first, was first the master of the system. And it didn't work. Like they were starting 300 people at a corporation, and none of them turned into Abhyasis. Like it was it was this, everyone was excited about it. I was talking to a preceptor who went to one of these corporations, and they would go, and this was like a French woman, right, going to an Indian corporation. And they would start all these people, hundreds of people that, would learn the meditation techniques. And none of them stuck with it, right? Like they couldn't, they would get all these influx of people. This is, very typical for Dodgy. But now they're embracing all this wellness stuff here, right? What an amazing experience to address the topic of how to apply heartfulness meditation from optimal athletic performance on the stage at the Indian Olympic House in Paris with these people. So they have this guy's a personal trainer, and they're trying to use the heartfulness techniques to enhance athletic performance, right? These are all like things that shouldn't be done. And then this one here was a doctor that was involved who has no connection to heartfulness, and no connection to the whole organization. There are people who are involved now who are somehow using these things, but they're not even Abhyasis. So, anyways, it's been degraded, right? I mean, that's the which we've known that there's no there's just they're using it, all this wellness stuff. They're using the heartfulness system to convince people they can have better lives, better health, things like that. Like appealing to material aspect of their existence, be more successful, whatever. Which is the next step in the degradation of the system. And seeing Chargy at this gathering and the whole thing, and kind of remembering the gathering, and I mean, how much there's a lot of change there. Like this guy, Mr. M, who was kind of a little bit involved with, with he contacted me. He was watching my videos, and I found out he was sort of, on my ex's side, which was, like a deal breaker. And then I comment about it in a jury series video. Then he wrote me back saying, he didn't like that, I was mentioning him, like, I didn't, by name or whatever. But he, one of the things is he had sort of cut me off, and that was, I went and made an effort to reestablish contact with him, and I saw him at the gathering in 2020, and he said, kind of blew me off and whatever. And I was like, I made an effort. In fact, like he said to me, contact me again. Like he didn't have my number, so I sent him a Facebook thing, and he didn't respond. Like he didn't respond at all. And I made an effort. So I was like, all right, yeah, I made an effort. And this is before I found out about my ex thing. And so the guy, he, I contacted this other guy, Mr. V, and we had a good conversation about how bad the Heartfulness YouTube channel sucks. So this is 2021, before I knew about all the stuff, right? Before I was like kind of gone public on my journey series about how depraved the whole thing was becoming. And so I talked to this guy, and he said, yeah, these other people are involved with this. They're trying to fix the Heartfulness YouTube channel. And it's people I knew. And one of them was Mr. M, and he got in contact with me, and we talked again. And so, I let go all the weird kind of blowing off, kind of blew me off or whatever. And so, like people have reactions and they don't say anything, or they have a negative reaction to you, or they, and I felt like that happened, but I was, I let it go. But then I found out he was, he had called my ex when my daughter committed suicide. He didn't call me, and like I knew him a lot longer than my ex did. Right? It was a weird thing. And he had contacted me, and he had been kind of a truther. And the fact that he was, I mean, I had a kind of a thing there where anybody was friendly with my ex, or it was such a like an adversarial type of divorce and all those things, right? And so I said, all right, look, I don't want any further contact with you or whatever. So, it was just better for me. I mean, that was my policy for a variety of reasons, because, my ex was always going to be talking shit about me and saying things that were, warping people's perception of me. And these, so it's a deal breaker. I'm even for my own kids and things, right? Like you can't be in both camps. This is it's a different interpretation of these events and, the fabric of reality of what happened in the marriage and all these things, right? And our relationship. And my ex had this distorted perception of me that was bringing me down. And I, when we were together, I believed some of it. Like the person she was projecting back to me, I felt like that was who I was, or partly who I was. I knew she had all these, mental issues and whatever, but, I had my stuff as well, right? And I didn't know, how much it was my fault, how much it was her fault. Like, when you're in a dysfunctional relationship and both of you have issues, which, inevitably you both do, you don't know how much is you and how much is the other person. But then when she left, I realized a lot of it was her, just because of, so much disappeared. And I realized the way that she was creating a version of me, her version of me, and projecting that back on me was negatively affecting me, right? And this happens to everybody. Like when somebody needs you to be a certain thing, that you're not really that thing, or you're not that person, and that person wants you to become that for them, right? They want you to become whatever they need you to become, and you're kind of forced to play that role because of in this case psychological manipulation, whatever else was going on there, where just to keep the peace, right? And you have to embrace that role or pretend to be that for that person, right? And maybe you have a little bit of that in you or whatever, but they're trying to pull it out of you, right? Some negativity or some whatever to cast you in a role. You can be forced to be, everyone views you as a certain thing at your job, and you're really not that person, but then you kind of become that person because everyone's, projecting that on you, right? And so I said, I'm never doing that again. Like, that was it for me. And, I've stuck with that, right? I'm not going to be around people who, project things on me. That's why I call people out in my comment section when people try to make me into something I'm not, right? Even the good things, when people are saying to me, like calling me master or something. Like, I'm not a master. I'm not a spiritual master. I'm not like Charji or Babaji or Lalaji. This is not. It's not something you can fake. You're at that level and you're not, and I'm not at that level, right? So even the good things that people try to project on me, like I just, I'm not going to be that, right? I'm not going to embrace a role above someone else's distorted reality. But anyway, so this guy, I saw at the gathering, he was talking to this European woman, and later said that one of the reasons he was awkward was he and her were getting together, and she was coming out of a marriage, and he was coming out of a marriage, and so at this 1996 gathering, he got married, like to this woman he was later going to get divorced from, right? That like this stuff had come full circle. There was the former caretaker of the ashram before my brother. He had gone together with Mrs. B's sister, and then they were going to get married at that gathering. And Mrs. B went to Chargy, and it was a whole thing. I saw her crying, and they got really pissed at her because Chargy said he'd give it a year and you guys could get married, and then they got married at this gathering a year later. And so, all these things were there. There's these various weddings. There was like 15 weddings, and this was like a big gathering. I don't remember this stuff. Like I was there for it, and I remember the thing with my mom and some of my personal things, but I didn't remember these other things. And seeing it, like I remember being there, but it was like almost like just something that I dreamt. Like just like all the shit that's happened over these last couple of years, and just all of it, and the unthinkable that's happened with Dodgy and this collapse of the system, and just it's kind of interesting. And so I'm still kind of even processing it, just looking at the whole thing, and just seeing how all these things played out. And I would say that when you would go to a gathering, things would just open up and develop, and like that was all kinds of things would happen. Like you'd go and charge, you would come to America, or you go to India and you come back, and things would change, and new things would start, and old things would end. It was amazing how it happened. But it was always, there was this sense of progress and things ending well. Like they started, you were evolving and things were going in the right direction spiritually, and your material life would reflect that, right? And things that weren't helping you would fall away, and things that were would come to you, and people and things like this, right? And seeing this gathering like so many years later, this certainly wasn't Chargie's last trip to America. That was something like 2006 or 7 or something like that. I don't remember the exact. It was 2008 maybe was his last time he was traveled here. But since that time, like things haven't gone that way, right? Like just because of what's happened with Dodgy and then all these people, and it's just things are regressing, right? Which is sad to say, but it is the reality. And I feel, I don't want to say call it pride, but there's a sense of, I feel at least kind of good about my ability to cope. Like I'm thinking we're all trying to cope with, what Chargy used to do for everybody in the organization. and that's not there. And I think lots of people just have given up and they haven't been able to keep the connection going. You have to fight for it now, which I talk about all the time in my Gratefulness meditation channel. You have to fight for it. You have to fight for the connection. It's just not available like it was. There's a lot more effort put on the Abhyasi. So, anyways, let me just wrap this thing up here, and I'll continue on, whatever. Okay, so I just want to add one more thing to this. The preface to this is the opposite of this is that in Saj Marg it was always said that, like, if somebody took their first 3 sittings, got introduced to the Saj Marg system, they would come back in a future life. Most people would quit, most people would go on their way. 1 out of 40 would stay, which is a very low retention rate. But those other 39 people would come back because their soul would want this. Charji said there was always souls that were disembodied souls that would come in to the ashram when he was giving satsang. They just wanted the transmission. Like, the transmission is on a soul level is the essence of, like, nutrition, like spiritual nutrition, right? And so I've always believed that because, of course, I would believe it just because they said it, because I trust in the masters of the system. It's not something you can prove because you don't know, you can't see into the future. And I mean, I guess you can see into the future and see somebody's life, but it hasn't happened yet, right? And so, like, in our limited third dimensional world where time is linear, we can't, really experience the future. We might be able to see the future a little bit. We might be able to have a vision of the future, but we can't experience it as being reality yet because it hasn't happened yet on a material plane of existence. But on a spiritual plane, you can see it. And the reason I can believe it experientially, like, you can believe something because you trust somebody, you can take somebody's word for it, or you can have an experience, and having an experience is always better. But, I've had all these meditations and where I've been really, restless, and time is going really slow. Time is just, the meditation's excruciating. And I would see it to the end, and by the end, there would be bliss. There would be a minute of bliss at the end. Like, I'd meditate for an hour, and the 59th minute, there'd be bliss. But also, I've seen how I've progressed over time. Babaji used to say, even if you're having a bad meditation, stick with it. And, there's things that are happening on a subliminal level, and not subliminal, but spiritual level. Spiritual is more subtle than subliminal. But there are things that are happening beyond your egotistical consciousness, and I've experienced that over and over again. So I know the efficacy of the system and how it wears away. Charji would talk about how, wind and water can wear away at rock. And that he would say, love patiently bore, that you just stick with it. The love will wear things down, will wear away resistance in a subtle way where there's no counter reaction or whatever it is, right? There was a story he used to tell where he'd say, the sun and the wind and the rain and, these various elements were trying to make a man take off his coat, right? And the wind tried to blow his coat off, and, the rain tried to, the guy just kept on clinging tighter to it. But then the sun just, he just brought it up to a higher level of temperature, and the guy took his coat off, right? And he used that example as love, the most subtle, and that's, in this case, the warmth from the sun as opposed to the strength of the wind and these other things, right? And so that subtle energy wears away at things. Like rock can be worn away by water. Of course, water's softer than stone, but water that just, cuts a channel through the canyon. You look at the Grand Canyon, these other places, right? And so I believe all that. Like, I've experienced it, I believe it, right? But what we're looking at now in terms of the results of Charji's work, and there was positive results, and so many of us benefited from those results. But, even before Daji took over, there were all these kids that used to go to this gathering, these gatherings, and I talked about this in other Journey Series videos. There's all these kids that used to go to these gatherings, including my kids, and these kids all seemed special. Like, they were born into Saj Marg families, and I always, felt good of the advantage they had. I had 30 years of being a non-Abhyasi and no connection no discernible connection, no visible connection to Sajmarg and this whole thing that I'm doing, right? And I felt like these kids who grew up with it, right? They had this incredible advantage that they grew up and they went to the ashram, they met the master of the system, and they were able to participate in the whatever it was going on there, and their parents would read them the books and teach them the philosophy. And these kids just all seemed to be like really saintly. They all seemed to be special. They would put on these plays, and I thought, well, how great they'll be when this generation becomes practitioners, because they'll bring in a bunch of new people. Of course, there was talk about in the Whispers messages, they talk about indigo children, this idea of indigo children or crystal children, these spiritual, a group of spiritually higher developed souls that are being born into the world, that we're going to take the world to the next level on a spiritual level. And Babaji talked about these people, right? These higher developed souls incarnating in. And they weren't going to, and these kids just wouldn't tolerate the system the way it is. And they would bring about this change, right? And so, I believed all that. And I still kind of believe it, but these kids didn't start, right? Most of the kids who grew up in the mission, and it's a little bit different in India because in India, they want to please their parents. But these kids grew up in the mission. They quit. They never, or they didn't even start. They took their initial sittings and they left. And it was a real bummer. Like, I was like, wow, that didn't pan out, right? And, that was towards the end of Chargie's life. Of course, he wasn't traveling as much in these things. But, then when my kids started and quit, and this whole thing, I had a dream about my son last night, which kind of ties into this whole thing. But it's been a real disappointment, right? And it was the one thing I hope to give my kids. It's the best thing I have to offer them. And they're not going to do it, at least for now, and I don't think, this life they'll do it. And, me and my ex raised our kids in a way where so much of it was Sajmarg. We did Sajmarg activities and tried to include it into the homeschooling, and, everything was about Sajmarg, and they got, really a big, dose of it, right? And they, of course, the family falling apart and the way the marriage went, all the things, didn't contribute, didn't help out, but, it just never resonated with them, right? And it's a real bummer because Charji said, in the fruit of the tree, that these kids were picking these specific families and parents to become, abhyasis. I mean, these kids were all, chosen for this. They were choosing, their souls were choosing to be born in these families. And, aside from the Sajmark teaching, I believe in that, as being that all kids are choosing their circumstances. I mean, it's part of the Sajmark teaching, but also just my understanding of how it works. And for none of these kids to become abhyasis, like none of them, right? Like, it's bizarre. There was a young woman who was giving sittings on Facebook, and I think her parents might have quit, but she ended up doing it. And I didn't see her at the ashram. I'd never seen her before. I mean, she might have been there. And I don't know if she's still doing it, but she was giving sittings, like the heartfulness sittings. But, that's a rare occasion. She's an American girl or something, Canadian or something like that. I think American. But, it's very rare. And so watching this video with Charji in 1996, and then looking at so many of these people who have quit, and so many people have, I don't know what they're doing. Some of them are embracing this dodgy debacle. But, the results are not good. Like, it's taken a turn for the worse, the whole organization. And again, I can believe in this idea that there's going to be a redemption for all these people, because in a future life they'll get it, right? And they'll come back, and, that's fine. If there's a system to come back to, I mean, that's, it's debatable. Like, at least, for now it's here. Like, for now it's still going. I mean, for some of us who can connect to the energy, I'm not sure everyone's connecting to the energy the way, I don't know. Like, it's just for each person to assess for themselves. And it seems like most of these people are just lost. And, it's the results are bad. Like, what's happened with Daji, and then all the abhyasis, and, it's taken a major turn for the worse, right? And, it's shocking to me. Like, it's one of the things that, I don't want to say it's, it's not really, it's not affecting my faith in the system, because I know how great the system is or was for me, and is still for me, and how it was in the past. and I know its effect on me and other people. So I know it's there, and I know we're going through a dark period, and this is just the way it is too. So I'm not really questioning it. And I have no choice but to just keep on going along. Like my decision's already been made, so I mean it's not like I mean it's still working for me, and I'm happy with it, right? Like I'm happy with the how it is for in a bad situation. I feel good about it, in terms of everything turning for the worse and the organization going to shit. I feel good about it. At least in terms of doing the gratefulness, and some of it's being saved and things like this, right? But it isn't affirming. Like I said, it's not shaking my faith in the system in the long game. But what's happened now is certainly not affirming, right? Like it's not, no one would have thought this was a possibility. I mean, like anything close to this, like it's so bad, it's so degraded, it's so, in the stupidest possible way. Because Dodgy and his people are stupid, like the stupidness of the, not just the Brighter Minds scam, but all of it. Like it's not like they're competent criminals. Like it's like it's not like he's a supervillain. It's just like stupidity and just incompetence, and it's just low level, low vibration, low consciousness. And for the system to devolve into that, and all the people to go along with it, and just or whatever they're doing, and not having any sort of ability to adapt. Like I've adapted, right? Like I'm not bragging, but I've adapted, and I've taken the path was laid out in front of me, and I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't create it. I was given choice points, and that gathering where I felt the transmission when Dodgy was giving a sitting, the Basant in 2023, and then all the information that came to me, and the choice, there was no real choice. The path was laid out, and I followed it. And I don't know if other people are doing that. I can't speak for them, but I've been able to adapt because of that, because they gave me a path. I desperately need this system. It's just I need it. Like it's part of what how I function, and it's the reason for my existence, and so I have to have it, right? And so I was given Dodgy wasn't providing it. The heartfulness wasn't giving the system wasn't, it was contaminated and compromised, and so they laid out a path for me, my soul or the divine being, whatever it is, right? And I followed that path, and I've adapted, and so it's been a success story, right, for me personally. And then the gratefulness meditation, all the stuff that we're doing there. But anyways, I just thought I'd add this stuff here. When I see these videos, I would never. No, I don't think anybody at that gathering in 1996 would foresee what's happened, right? Because it's bad, and we're talking about a system that is talking about great upheavals and its destruction, where England's supposed to sink into the ocean, like an island that isn't named, that sounds a lot like England, and Babaji's My Vision is supposed to sink into the ocean. There's supposed to be nuclear war, and the poles are supposed to reverse themselves, and all the Whispers prophecies, which I'm going to read in some future video again. But if you listen to the Whispers prophecies and the My Vision, in the Babaji's My Vision chapter, then and then the other things that have been said about it, well, it's pretty like in terms of what the Earth's going to be like, it's really bad. But no one was never anything talking about the collapse of the Sajmarg organization and the members. Like that was never a part of it. Like that was supposed to be a beacon of light in a dark time, and right now it's been completely compromised. So as we head into that dark time. And so anyhow, let's just add this to the video and my journey series, and then we'll move on from there.